Great agencies don't chase their clients for money, they have their contracts do it for them.
The way our agreement works is the minute Cooper signed the deal, which gave you everything you wanted, our fee was due and payable, which is why at 7:30, I received confirmation of a wire transfer from escrow indicating payment in full.
If your agreements are weak, every single time that you send a client an invoice, they're always going to have something to say about it. In this video, I'm going to show you how to structure your contracts and invoicing properly so your clients' expectations are locked in and you always get paid. We're going to cover what matters, what doesn't, and how to build agreements that scale with your agency. If you guys want more clients, more sales, and marketing that actually works, you should subscribe because that's what all my videos are built to help you do. Now, a very important disclaimer here, I am not a lawyer and nothing in this video is meant to replace one. This video is about helping agency owners understand why contracts are so important, how to use them, and how to avoid the common problems that lead to scope creep, not getting paid, and unnecessary stress for the business. You can, and you probably should, have a lawyer draft or review your existing contracts. And in many cases, that is probably going to cost you a couple $1,000s. But even if a lawyer writes your contract, you still need to understand what is in it, because if you don't understand the contract, it can't protect you, and if you don't enforce it, it doesn't matter anyway, right? There's plenty of solid contract templates online that you can start with, but remember, templates are not a replacement for legal advice, but they are a very good starting point. So the ideal is that you start with a template, you understand the fundamentals from this video, and then you work with a lawyer to refine and customize based on the services that you offer. Now, naturally, you need to first understand what contracts and invoices are actually for. So a lot of people think that contracts exist for when things go horribly wrong while you're providing the service, but in reality, they exist to prevent things from going wrong, right? So a contract is what sets the expectations, for what's being delivered, how the payment works, what happens if things change, and the invoice enforces those expectations. When you have vague expectations, the invoice feels negotiable, right? And when an invoice feels negotiable, you're gonna have to defend the value of your products, the value of your services, and you're just gonna start chasing all your clients for money. A good contract removes friction from the sales process. Now you need to make sure that you're choosing the right agreement type for your pricing model. So if you do project-based work, website audits, logos, etc., you need to make sure that you have a defined scope, a very clear end of the project, and deposits and milestones baked in. If you work on a retainer model, paid ads, SEO, you need a recurring billing language, clear boundaries for your service, and pause and termination clauses. If you have a subscription model, ongoing website management, social media posting, you need minimum terms, cancellation rules, and very standardized delivery definitions. And if you work on performance-based, lead gen consulting, you definitely need very specific tracking definitions, very specific attribution rules, and risk disclaimers. If you try to have one blanket kind of contract for all four of these different pricing models, things are going to get very confusing for your client, and there's going to be a ton of payment disputes. A very important side note here, all of your clients should always pay for their own hosting, software, ad accounts, and whatever other platforms that you're using to complete the service for them. You can manage them, and you can, of course, be an admin in all of them, things like Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and whatnot, but you should never own them. The contract that you hand off to them should say who owns the account, who pays for them, and what access you retain during and after the agreement, right? This is going to protect both of you, because if the relationship between you and the client ends, they keep access to their entire business, and you avoid, any liability that would come with that and, other complicated parts of a handoff. You also need to make sure that you're defining your scope in your contracts the right way. Now, scope is where most relationships between the agency and the client break down pretty fast, right? Your contract needs to define what is included in your service provision, how much of whatever that is included, and what is explicitly not included. That's what a lot of people miss. Limiting inside of the contract does not make you a difficult service provider. It makes the relationship actually sustainable between you and your customer. So for example, let's say you define support as email only during business hours, Monday through Friday. If you don't explicitly state that limit, your clients are going to assume that you will reply to them pretty much instantly, from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., throughout the weekend, et cetera, et cetera. If it's not written in the contract, it is going to be assumed. When we're thinking about revisions and expansion work, we need to make sure that revisions are limited and any expansion work is very intentional. Your contract has to say how many revisions or iterations are included in the rate that the customer is paying, what actually qualifies as a revision versus what needs to be asked for as new work. And that additional work, that new work, requires written approval. Anytime that your client needs a revision or a change order, it should not require them to confront you, call you, send a nasty gram over email. When they are aware of the terms surrounding these changes, they're going to make appropriate requests to you and not be mad at you. When we're thinking about timelines and delays, we need to make sure that any timelines stated in the contract protect your schedule as the business, not just the expectations of the customer. You need to outline when the work actually begins, what the client needs to provide to you in order to keep things moving, and what happens when they don't provide those things to you and then the project gets delayed. If you don't have this, all of your projects are going to get delayed, right? So for example, let's say you deliver a website draft to a client and you're waiting, 2-3 weeks for approval on just the draft. They haven't rejected anything yet, so it's just kind of, sitting in the ether. If you don't have a response deadline in the contract, the project will never progress and you're going to stop producing revenue from that client because you did not lock them in to giving you an answer in a particular time frame. Now, payment terms are arguably the simplest, but it's where a lot of agencies lose money. Your contract just needs to say when the payment is due, how it is collected, and that work does not begin until that payment clears. For projects, all your deposits should be non-negotiable, and for any retainers, billing should be automatic and in advance. Now, of course, related to your payment terms is your invoicing systems. Now, invoicing software is pretty simple. Stripe, QuickBooks, FreshBooks, Wave, PandaDoc, they all work. What matters more is consistency, automation, and simplicity, and alignment with the contract. Every single time you send an invoice, it should just confirm what the client already agreed to. It shouldn't surprise them with any new requirements, any new services, any less services, anything like that. All of your clients should see their invoices for monthly retainers on the same day every single month for the same amount that is tied to the same scope unless otherwise discussed. All right, now we can get a little more technical. So we're going to talk about value stacking inside of the proposal. So a proposal is where the pricing actually starts to make sense to the customer, right? So instead of you presenting just numbers, you should break your service into components to show a fair market value. And what that's going to do is it reframes the conversation from what is this going to cost me to what inside of my business, if I'm the customer, does this replace or save? Instead of saying, our monthly fee is $5,500. You can explain it a different way, like the fair market value of this engagement is actually $8,800 per month. And then you break it down, you say this is this much, this is that much. And then you lay out, okay, the total market value of this engagement would be $8,800 per month. And then you anchor it to your actual asking price. So we're doing this for you at your asking price. Continuing on with some more advanced tactics, we can talk about retainers and ACH authorization. Now, all your retainer agreements should include automatic billing, clear billing dates, and service continuation that is tied to the status of the payment. If payment fails, work pauses, and there is no exception to that rule. Now, if you don't already know what ACH is, ACH just allows you to collect payment directly from a client's bank account under some terms that you've agreed to. Anytime that you have an ACH form, it needs to define the payment schedule and the cancellation notice that your client needs to give you. Now, ACH is extremely helpful for any kind of retainer or retainer adjacent model. So for example, Let's say you run monthly retainers for multiple local HVAC companies. Now, instead of sending invoices and waiting for approval at the beginning of every single month, you just have your clients sign an ACH authorization form. And that form states that the retainer is billed on the first of every single month. You are authorized to withdraw that amount automatically, and cancellations require a 30-day written notice. Now, all your payments will happen on schedule, and both parties know what to expect from the engagement. And lastly here, we're going to be talking about payment plans. So anytime you have a payment plan, it should be, for the most part, automated and not trust-based, right? Subscriptions need minimum terms and clear exits, just like we talked about in the last section. And if you're on a revenue share, you have to define tracking and responsibility as clear as humanly possible. Because if you're in a revenue share deal, your income depends on some variables that you can't control. So your contract has to reflect that risk. So for example, let's say you're a lead gen agency and you're paid per booked call, but your client doesn't answer the phone or follow up with any of the leads that you send them. If you don't shift the responsibility for sales follow-up to the client, because obviously you can't follow up with the leads when they call your client, right? You are going to take the financial hit when they don't manage their pipeline properly. And as for late payments, you need to spell out late fees, if there's any grace period that you're going to offer, how to pause services, and how and when services can be terminated. You just need to keep in mind that these are not worst case scenarios. They are very, very common, especially in the agency world. You need to create rules that you are comfortable actually enforcing that protect your team's time and your top line revenue. Now guys, when contracts and invoices are done right, your clients are going to feel much safer, payments are going to become much more predictable, and your agency is going to be much easier to scale. If you want help auditing your business's contracts, you should leave a comment below, and I can give you my advice and recommend a place to get yours drafted professionally.